direction. It will give you eyes, give you hope, it'll give you perspective. I've been back and forth, and yeah, I had my crashes. Now I've seen the road, it goes every direction. Oh, there are stories to tell, times we grew and the times we fell. Oh, I've been afraid some days.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. I'm currently driving to Chicago for a work trip. A little bit of travel here in the last couple weeks. I just drove through a crazy tornado, a 70-mile-an-hour wind. It wasn't a real tornado, but it was crazy winds. And you know, before I get there, I'm gonna run out of daylight. I figured I might as well drive it on the straight road, talk to you guys about my Leica M10 purchase, and I'll break this video up into 3 spots. You just saw some photos I took over the weekend, and I think just after a week of using it, I have some initial impressions that I can share with you guys. So first of all, let's go into 3 sections. Like I said, why did I end up with the Leica M10? What was I looking at? What considerations were made? Let's talk about that. 2, why did I pick the Summicron 50mm f2? And what is my lens approach? And then 3, what are my initial impressions of using the camera? So let's start with number 1. Okay, first, why did I pick the Leica M10, and was that my initial intent? If you watched my last video, I was shooting with my Canon 8E1, and I said I was going there to look at the SL2S, and I was, because I was like, you know, I really want a premium build quality camera, and I had this Lumix S5, and I thought, well, if the SL2S can do everything, some video, and also photos, and get kind of like a build quality and premium feel, maybe that's the way to go. But when I went into the Leica Soho store in New York, I played with everything, and I just didn't like how big the SL2S was. I just felt like it was just too big, and it was just too cumbersome, and I didn't love it. I mean, it was built really, really nice, but even access to the exposure triangle was a little bit more cumbersome than I would like, and something that's on the Lumix is so easy. So I quickly kind of ruled that out. I then picked up the Leica Q2, and I thought about, what if, you know, I shot with that Leica Q2 for, I think it was $5,700 or whatever it is. You get a lens with it, you know, it's a good camera. And I put that up to my eye, I played with it. Yes, it's sharp, yes, it's a high megapixel camera, all those things, but ultimately I decided that the OVF experience I talked about in my last video, it had to be there. So I kind of ruled out the Q2 from that. It just felt like the Q2 wasn't the full experience I was looking for in terms of premiumness and everything else. Not to say it's a bad camera, clearly it's not. So then I picked up the Leica M11. And of course the guy at the Leica Soho store, he hands me the Leica M11 with the 50 Summicron Apo, which is just bonkers, right? And then he puts on the 35 1.4 Summilux, and it was really, really nice. So I started going through the different features, the things they changed, and there's some differences on there for sure. But you know, as you know, that camera's $9,000 body only before you do anything, which is just, it's expensive. And I started looking at the other cameras they had on the used display there, and they had M10Rs, they had M10s, they had M10Ps, and they had some other cameras there too. And ultimately I decided that, you know, the M10R is almost the same price as an M11, so there's that. And the M10P is very much just like the M10, except for you get some touchscreen functionality, and you get a quieter shutter, and there might be, I mean, the Leica logo's gone, and it was like $1,500 more than a used M10. And so going from $9,000 on the M11 down to $5,000 for the M10 used, I thought was a good deal. And this M10 that I picked up, again, like I mentioned in my initial video, if the file system hadn't been changed, only appeared to have like 1,300 on the shutter, and the body was in what I would consider like near mint condition. Also came with an extra battery, yada, yada, yada. So ultimately I decided that I wanted that OVF experience, that rangefinder experience, that unique Leica experience. I wanted a brass body. That was another thing. I liked the black color, and get the M11 in black it's not a brass body. It's I believe it's aluminum, I believe. So there was that. Then when it came to the M10R, I was like, I don't need the high megapixel count that comes with it. So ultimately, I picked the M10. I didn't think the $1,500 premium for the M10P was worth it, and I wasn't willing to spend $9,000 on the M11. I have heard of some issues with the M11, like it freezing up, people getting some bad copies. So it was that whole thing. The M10 it was for me. It's been tried and true. It's been out for 4 years, and everybody I know says, hey, the M10's a solid camera. So the M10 it was, and that's why I picked the M10. All right, part two. Hit a bump. Part two. Why did I pick the Leica 50mm Summicron? Now, arguably, this is one of the things I was like, I shouldn't do this. This was a brand new Summicron. I think it was $2,500 brand new. I think on B&H they're going for like $2,750. So the Leica store is actually a little less. You can fact check me on that. I'm not 100% sure. But one of the things I thought to myself was, if I'm going to go for a Leica body, part of what makes Leica so unique and so special is their glass. Now, I'm well aware that like Voigtlander makes like a 50mm Apo that's amazing. There's Zeiss glass that's fantastic. I've shot that before. And it doesn't mean I'm going to continue to buy only Leica glass, but I figure if I'm going to have Leica glass and get the full experience, I wanted to do it with the 50mm. And I got with the Summicron because, you know, it's kind of the classic focal length. That Summicron's a little legendary, I believe. And it's just a good overall lens. It has some of those imperfect qualities that I kind of like, the unique characteristics. A lot of justifying purchase here, but I just wanted to go for that to get the full experience of it. And what I don't like about the lens is it doesn't have a focus tab on it. That's kind of sucky. It flares super hard if you shoot in direct sunlight, really bad. And it does what I just learned this term from one of my friends called veiling, where you can get kind of that washed out image if you're shooting direct into the sun. And so it's not a perfect lens by any means. In fact, you could probably pay a third the cost and get a really nice lens out of Voigtlander or you know, a Zeiss. But I wanted the Leica experience, and I'll tell you, some of the color and rendition that's come out of this lens so far, as you saw in the beginning of this video, is really, really, really good. And I'm very happy that I made the purchase. It's one of those lenses you could have forever. I don't regret it at all. I protected the front of it with a B+W, one of their high-end filters. I forget, like Nano something or other. I don't know. And so I'm really, really glad that I got the Leica lens. Some future lenses, like a 35 or a 28, I might consider Voigtlander, and we'll go from there. But that's why I ended up picking the 50 plus the M10 itself. Okay, last but not least, what are my initial impressions of the Leica? From a build quality perspective, I just head over heels. I remember when I picked up my M8, I picked up my M240, I was just in love with the build quality. When I went from the M240, which was the first Leica I had, which I felt like it was just too fat and too chunky, and I didn't love it, to be honest with you, I went to the M8. The M8 is kind of what sold me on, like, oh, yeah, I need to be in Leica. Now, I sold the M8 for a host of different reasons. I probably shouldn't have. I should have kept it. But I sold it because, like, you know, for the cost, you know, it's just too slow. The screen is not repairable. All those different things. I should have held on to it. Should have held on to it. But I didn't. And I knew that if I ever get back into Leica, I'd want to get into a newer body that was of the same kind of design and vintage, that was more of like an M6 style Leica M, and that's where the M10 came into play. So my initial impressions of the camera itself is, I love it. It's not a fast camera. The way I've been shooting it mostly is I put spot metering on, looking through the rangefinder. I put ISO on A, I put the shutter speed on A, and I set my aperture. Unless I know I'm going for an intentional, like, slow shutter speed, or I don't want the shutter speed to drop below a certain amount because I'm going to get, you know, motion blur. Most of the time I've been shooting in some good daylight. I will shoot it in AA and aperture, so it's kind of like aperture priority mode, aperture priority mode. Is that right? And so that's been really, really good. I like that, and I just kind of meter off of, you know, the subject's face or whatever it is, and then I recompose. And that's the magic part right there. It's the same thing with my film camera. All the crap that's on a screen, like I'm looking at my S5 and you've got, you know, all this crap around it. It's good to know. It really is. But it distracts me. And when there's a focusing mechanism, like automatic auto-focusing mechanism, and it's like tracking or whatever, I'm constantly like watching the tracking to see if it's working. I don't know why. It's just the way my brain works. And I focus less on my composition. In the first week of using this Leica, I have focused way more on my composition, and I personally feel like I see it already more in my images and the output. It's just, I feel like I'm more intentional. I'm spending more time on the composition of the image, and I like that a lot more. It's small, the camera's small, it's unobtrusive, and it's everything I hoped it to be. But there is a revelation in this. I can quickly tell it cannot be my only camera. And that's why I'm thinking about just keeping the S5, because the S5, frankly, is cheap. And it works really well. Obviously, for video, I have the ZV-1, so there's that. That's not the reason why I keep the S5. But there are times where I just, flat out, I need autofocus. I'm going to need autofocus somewhere down the road. On top of that, I had to take some self-portraits today for some work-related stuff. I needed to have a portrait to put on like a slide deck. I'll put it up right now. I couldn't do this with the Leica. I had to put it on a tripod, I set up a key light, and I put the 50 on there. I went into the remote app, and I used the autofocus to step back and take a photo and set exposure remotely. I couldn't do that if I had my Leica M. So for me, I think my S5 is going to be like relegated to any kind of sports stuff my kids are doing. It's going to be relegated to, I need autofocus for something. And the M is going to be like my passion camera or everyday camera for stuff I like to shoot. Like I said, I carried it all weekend, and I absolutely loved having it. I love the experience. I'm not disappointed whatsoever. You pay a crap ton of money for this. Is that worth it? If I'm being reasonable, no. But if I'm into photography and that's where you sit, yeah, it is. It's totally worth it. Because it's an experience you can't get anywhere else. The closest you can come is with Fuji's hybrid OVF system, but it's still not the same. It's still not the same. It's just different. And having that premium build quality in your hands is fantastic. And so, first impressions, it's everything I hoped it would be. I love owning it and shooting with it, and we'll just keep working it. But I really feel like this weekend I got some of my best images because I was more intentional. It's like when you set the focus, you know something's going to happen. You're no longer worrying, hey, is autofocus grabbing onto that guy's pupil? No, you know where the focus point's going to be, and now you like just focus on, hey, I want it to be, cut off at the bottom third, and I want the sun up it. You get to focus on your composition a lot more, and it makes a huge difference. It just does. So that's my initial impressions of the Leica and my first experience, and why I chose the M10 in the 50. So sorry if this is noisy with road noise. I'm driving, like I said, but I wanted to record this for you guys as I head to Chicago. I do have the Leica with me. It's there. I won't grab it because I'm driving, but I really love it. Maybe I'll put some pictures of it here in the video. But thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video. See ya.